Hey everybody, welcome back. I am so excited to have Dr. Sienna Windsor joining us this month on our vodcast, coming to us live from Tennessee. Sienna, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
And if you don't know, Sienna helps with the NDBI Navigator Notes monthly newsletter. She's one of our amazing editors. So you might have seen her picture out there. You might have heard her name out there. And we are so grateful for all of her help with that to disseminate NDBI goodness any way we can get it out there. It's so good.
Yeah, it's been so much fun. Been such a great project to work on together.
Yes, move that needle over. Sienna,
Yeah,
can you tell everybody a little bit more about your background, your schooling, how you kind of got into NDBIs?
sure. Yeah. My initial introduction to the field was working at a summer camp in Phoenix, Arizona, with a group called the Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center, SARC. And I ended up loving the work so much. I had taken just like a temporary position for the summer, but completely fell in love with it and ended up coming and joining them full time. I stayed with them for about 6 years before deciding that I wanted to go back to school, wanted to complete my PhD. And so I just finished that last August at Vanderbilt. And I've stayed here in the Nashville area and am working with a really wonderful group of people who also graduated from the program for a company called Flip Behavior. So right now I spend a lot of my time doing consultation and then also direct work in schools and at home. Um, Primarily in that like 0 to 8 early childhood age range.
Yeah. So you got to spend some time at SARC, which is amazing. And then from a summer camp, what was your role like over there?
When I first started for the summer camp, it was really essentially it was an RBT role, but the RBT wasn't created yet. So it was one-on-one, direct intervention, assisting with facilitating social interactions and making sure that we were doing anything that we needed to the environment to enable participation to the fullest extent. It was really fun. It was a great first introduction to how you could use some of you know these tools and teaching strategies that we have. And I got to work with a variety of different kids throughout those couple of months. And so it was really it gave me like a little taste, and then I was ready to learn more.
Yes, just a palette. Get it on the
Yeah.
palette, enjoy it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's incredible at SARC is when they have, I think it's PRT that they kind of infuse all the way through from the little ones up into adolescents and adults, which is incredible to see that NDBIs are being implemented in such a capacity. And I don't know a lot of other agencies that really support NDBIs or implement NDBIs for older kiddos. So older for me again is like, 8 or 9, which is not
Right.
old by any means. So that's incredible that you got to be there and kind of see that process.
Yeah, it definitely shaped, my trajectory and what I'm interested in and where I've gone, having that be my initial introduction to the field. Um, so falling into NDBIs, it's like that was what I knew of for
Ah,
ABA was PRT and really naturalistic, child-led, in context instruction. And so that's what I love.
yeah, just the aha moment. I'm very envious. I wish that I fell in at that right time. I
Yeah.
fell in at a different time, but I've had an incredible journey and am in a happy place now where I feel like evidence-based practice plus developmentally appropriate practice is the place to be. So I am happy to hang out here in this field with you where it just feels good.
Yeah, my background, so like undergrad, I was family science and human development. My focus was always child development. I wasn't sure exactly what direction I wanted to go, if it was going to be teaching or psychology. I knew I was interested in child development. Um, and so that's what I had studied, and I got my master's in that too. And I think that that makes NDBI is a really natural fit, is this emphasis on, yes, our science of human behavior and what we know about effective teaching,
Yep.
really grounded in a developmental perspective.
Yes. And I wonder, do you think that, it's not on our task list. It's not, I'm just trying to think like the people that we serve as young children, if we are supporting young children, should our field, our practitioners, should we have some basic child development coursework? Should we have a base? I'm thinking of programming, the goals that we are
Yeah.
picking for the programming that we are setting up. Sometimes there's just a little wonky or out of developmental scope and sequence. And most of the time, it's because a lot of practitioners don't have training or have been years since they've taken a child development course. Do you find with your background really being in that would be helpful for people to have, that you rely on that? That's a strength that you can pull from?
It's a good question. I do think it's helpful. I don't know if it's requiring it or if it's really emphasizing where to turn. Like, we know that there are these organizations. If you're going to be a teacher, you can be looking at like the CEC, and you can be looking at some of these other organizations, NACI, that are putting out guidelines related to developmentally appropriate practice and what does it mean to be teaching young children, supporting young children. Um, but I lean on it a lot.
Yeah.
So it's tough because not everybody is going to work with young children. Not everybody is going to work in a school context or at home in an early intervention context.
Mm.
There's so much variety in our field that
Yep.
it's difficult. I can see how it's challenging to come up with what those requirements should be across the board for everybody. But I do think in coursework, really emphasizing like these are the resources
Yeah.
that you can use. And maybe it's part of supervision, and being a supervisor
Absolutely.
is really focusing on, okay, for this population in this context,
Yep.
these are the critical principles that you should be aware of.
Yeah, I like that. Thinking about the agency that you work at or the organization or your mentor or supervisor would be guiding you. Hey, we work with young children, 0 to 4, for example. Here are some things that you should know if you've never worked with this age range. So, understanding that, a 2-year-old is not a smaller version of a 4-year-old. There's a big developmental gap there, and helping providers really understand that so we can best meet the children where they are, not just where we want them to be. And to think about that from a programming perspective of these kind of goals that we're picking, we're missing some prerequisite foundational skills that are going to really help make or break it. So for me, that's where I always lean into that child development milestones. We know are a little bit different for our kids who have splinter skills and developmental spiky profiles. But there is kind of a trajectory that kids follow in
Yeah.
terms of development. So for having us having the ability to understand that and to be aware of that is really going to help inform, like you said, developmentally appropriate practice. So maybe
Yeah.
not the task list, but it is if you work with these children, I feel like we have an obligation or responsibility to be well informed about how young children are developing and how we can best support them. And
Yeah, I think it informs goal selection in a major way of like, are we hitting the pivotal skills? Are we hitting those behavioral cusps before trying to address maybe some of the other items that you might find on an assessment that aren't happening yet, but like, let's get at this social engagement, joint attention, the interaction. Let's build that up first before trying to introduce or layer in some of those other skills. And it's an ongoing process. Like, I'm still learning. Now I'm in elementary schools. I'm working with, like you said, kids who to me seem old because they're beyond 5 years old, which is where I started. Like, toddlers and preschoolers was really who I worked with for many, many years. And so I'm having to adjust and rethink and go back to the literature and think about, okay, for a 6-year old, for a 7-year old, who maybe hasn't received a whole lot of support up to this point, and we are still working on some of those foundational core skills, but they're not a toddler anymore. It's not the same type of interaction. It is going to look different. And how can we incorporate and weave in some of these same ideas that I think are still really useful and that we know still have evidence behind them, but in an appropriate way in that setting and for that learner.
Yeah, and I think about this in a one-to-one setting as well as the elementary classroom environment that you're talking about, having that developmental background or understanding of developmentally appropriate practice. I find that to be something that impacts programming, but I
Yeah.
also find it to be something that impacts behavior regulation. So having a child sit for circle time, right, for 20 minutes in there too, that's not developmentally appropriate. Or writing goals. This child will have near zero tantrums throughout the day. They're two, they should have tantrums. We would expect developmentally for them to be asserting themselves, right?
Yes.
So I feel like it also impacts not just skill acquisition programming, but how we have that. And a lot of the children that I see that are having these, kind of intense episodes of dysregulation, you can usually track it back to an adult having an unrealistic expectation for that child because they don't know that that's not what a 2 or a 3-year-old is even capable of doing at that time. So
Yeah.
for me, it kind of pulls back into having that understanding to support them from both lenses.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree.
What did you focus on when you were over at Vanderbilt?
A lot of NDBI work. So I was working, my advisor was Jennifer Ledford, who is phenomenal and really is a leader and an expert in single case design. So that was something that I learned a lot about, and I didn't really have that strong background coming in. Um, and so I learned about really research methodology and understanding that piece of it. And then when it came time to actually do my own papers or assignments or my dissertation, I was like, okay, how can I bring in some of this NDBI work that I'm so excited about and interested in? I took classes with Ann Kaiser, so I got to learn a lot more about EMT straight from the source, which was incredible. And then I did a lot of work at an inclusive preschool that they have on campus. Um, and so supporting not only autistic students, but students with, various diagnoses
Mhm.
or disabilities that maybe were newer to me, and got to learn a lot in that area too.
Wow, that is so cool. Anne is phenomenal. That would be incredible to get to learn from her. Was
Yeah.
the classroom, the inclusive classroom, was it Kid Talk EMT, NDBI, or just inclusive classroom that was just kind of a placement to get into?
It's just an inclusive preschool, so not tied to any one approach, although with having the, resources and access to all of the wonderful professors at Peabody, you definitely see EMT incorporated and some of those other interventions, like the pyramid model also was another big one that's focused on.
Yeah. Can you talk more about the pyramid model? I'm not sure if I know that one. Pyramid.
Okay, that's ML Hemmeter's work. And it's really social emotional learning
Okay.
and looking at group wide and in the classroom, things that the adults can be doing to support learning in that area. And so it is like those warm and responsive relationships and really consistent and predictable routines and visual supports and things that you can do for the group at large, and then looking at more of those specific interventions as needed.
Very interesting. I will look that up and then I will link some resources in the show notes for other people who want to look more into that.
Yes, I highly recommend challengingbehavior.org is the website. the resource section that they have put together on that website, I share with everybody because they're completely free to access and they're ready to go. You can download it and there it is. And they're so useful. There's documents, especially if you're working with families and doing any sort of help with like family routines and helping to problem solve or to troubleshoot with like getting ready in the mornings
Oh,
or consistent difficulty with the bedtime routine. There's some really great resources there that I like to use.
yeah. Are they targeted for a specific age range, or it can be kind of customized for?
0 to 5, that young, those young kids.
Thank you. Oh, that's
I
fantastic.
believe. I could be wrong. There might be more, but I think the bulk of what I've seen is that like toddler preschooler age range.
Very good, very good. And then your dissertation or your PhD work, what was your topic?
Yeah, I did an alternating treatments design, really looking at specific NDBI strategies. So we had one condition that was a baseline control condition where the child really played independently and we didn't offer a whole lot as like a play partner.
Mhm.
One condition where we would join in, follow the child's lead, reinforce all attempts and respond to all initiations, and then provide all of that great
Yeah,
narration and linguistic modeling and mapping. But
yeah,
we didn't actively join in play. And then in the third condition, we did follow the child's lead, all the same things, but we actually joined in play and modeled new play acts and expanded on the child's play. We didn't use shared control and we didn't purposefully contrive or create any opportunities. And we just wanted to see, okay, what are the impact of these different NDBI strategies on children's engagement? So my question was really like, what can we do? Um, and at what level are some of these strategies needed
mm,
for children to use the skills already in their repertoire to seek out and maintain interaction and engagement with us. And so we found for 3 of the 4 children that it was that play and language condition that resulted in the highest level of dyadic engagement,
very,
which was not surprising to me, what was still exciting to see like, yes, it really matters. Joining in play, being an active play partner
mm,
makes a big difference above and beyond just following the child's lead and having all their favorite activities out and
yeah,
being close in proximity and being animated and talking about what they're doing. Like you need to actively join in to
yeah.
keep that engagement going.
Yes, and that just tracks so much within like what we do in the ESDM, teaching development within the context of these affect-rich, interactive environments is really just the key to getting that engagement. So that's really incredible that your research tracking the same way as that and kind of identifying, what are those key strategies from NDBI that are effective for certain kids and certain conditions and certain environments. And where do we start to kind of pull that apart? There's so many strategies, so many things we can do, but do we need to do everything? And what is going to be the most impactful?
Yeah.
I think is a really great question to tease out.
And how do we teach it? Because sometimes play is hard to teach, to teachers, to parents, how to be a really fun and motivating play partner is not always easy. It doesn't always come naturally. And, you don't always have the time either as a parent. If we're talking about like working with families, that's a whole separate issue of like the feasibility of it. But it did kind of make me think, okay, what kind of guidance can we be providing even to other BCBAs and RBTs who didn't receive that kind of training and maybe their background isn't with young children, like we said.
Yeah.
Um, that's an important part is thinking about, and I know in ESDM, creating those joint activity routines, it's really, there is some explicit guidance. And I think the more that we can do that, the easier it makes it for practitioners and people who want to do this work, but maybe just haven't seen it modeled and aren't really sure how.
Agreed, 100%. And there's so many nuances within NDBIs when we are scaffolding out interventions. And I think what makes it so difficult is NDBIs look different in practice when we're scaffolding it out different things. There's not a set program, do this 3 times, run this way, do it that way. It's so very much in accordance with what you're doing with the child, co-constructing these activities, working within this proximal zone of development, scaffolding out as needed. And it really takes, I think, a lot of clinical decision-making skills to be able to do that. And the nuances of when and how to shape just are a bit trickier. But I also think getting back into what you were talking about, it's really important that we are focusing on that. And we're really considering how do we best support young children within this developmentally appropriate framework that we have,
Yeah.
creating those environments for them. That's so tricky, I think, for some people to do. Then we layer in play, where many adults probably haven't played since they were children, if they don't have younger siblings, if they're not yet parents themselves, or if they don't work in a setting where it might be a daycare or preschool. And so they kind of forget what it looks like to play, which is this ever evolving, unpredictable sequence of actions that just comes as it does, it evolves versus how adults tend to play. If you know what I'm talking about, put the cow in the yum yum hay. Right?
Yes.
It's a play. It's a version of play, but is that how young children play? Not exactly. It's more of that discrete style of playing. So, any
Yeah. We get
thoughts?
limited in our creativity as we're older in that way. I find myself doing it. I'm like, okay, I've done the same thing like
Yeah.
5 times in a row. I need to switch it up. But what can I do?
Yes, and kind of following the kids' lead, like you said, this
Yeah.
is what they're doing. They're taking the farm animal, they're putting it on the corn and spinning it around, and it flies off. That's play. That's
Yeah.
fun. That's what we try to teach with, and then have that modeling back and forth. Any resources on play that you can think of? This would be a cool thing to link. I'm going to rack my brain as well. Resources about just play in general, because we have, our kiddos that we support have different ways to play. And I'm a big fan of all play is okay,
Yeah.
100%. And so I'm wondering if there's any resources, links, websites out there that might have information about different levels of play, different styles of play, different ideas for play, what play teaches you, right? That would be a great resource to have.
hmm I would need to think too, because I agree with you, and I really hesitate to dive too much into any of the resources that want play to look a certain way or to follow a certain trajectory, although those can be helpful for assessment and for understanding
Mhm.
where a child is at. Um, in terms of like cause and effect play, or are they, engaging in parallel play or cooperative play? Um, but I can't think of right now any great
Mhm.
resources that just provide some guidance on fun activities that you might try and then see where the child goes. What do they like about it? What are they interested in? I think really it's almost more of those like reinforcer inventories. Like I love the one that you've shared on NDBI Navigator about the child interest inventory. And it goes through all of the different categories. And have you thought about this? And does the child like to pop bubbles? And do they like to spin? And what is exciting to them? What is play for them? I think that's the best starting point, is just finding what are those activities that they are going to seek out, and then thinking about, and how can I make it more interesting and more exciting with me than without me?
Yes,
Um, and
yes.
just going there, and it can be anything. It can be any activity.
What's that sticky goodness about it, that reinforcing aspect of like what you're talking about? I'll link that. I'll put a link for that document in the show notes. Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't even think
Yeah.
about that. and kind of figuring out where are those categories, where do the kids tend to hang out, and then can you meet them there, right? And then can you back out into a really incredible joint activity routine or an opportunity for teaching and learning, highlighting and identifying the key aspects that are fun. And like
Yeah.
you said, more fun with you than without you, that you can become a part of it to have that back and forth interactive nature of teaching and learning, which is going to facilitate that progress. Yeah, I think that's a great resource to try to identify potential inventory of child interest, reinforcing things. And then I sometimes kind of go back to play levels development. Perhaps I might see a technician working on socio-dramatic kind of level of play with a little one, and that little one is nowhere near, right? And so if the kid's not interested, they don't like the playing with the dolls. It's not that they don't like it, they might not, but it's more so we are at such a different level of play that you're, again, trying to teach something where they're nowhere near ready to be, and having an understanding of where that child's skill levels are at is going to help calibrate how I think our teaching and our activities, where we are layering in those learning opportunities, those goals, and those objectives. Um, but I feel like you can go online, different play level. You could find so many different versions of this is how we play. What's USOPAC? Unoccupied, occupied, solitary, right? Oh my goodness, there's so many different ones out there. And Connie Kesari has some good stuff. And Jasper with
Yes.
wordplay stuff that I've been looking into, which is different from other ones that I'm finding online. So those would be some great resources I'll link. But I'm trying to think like play in general. I think it depends on where you look.
Yeah. Yeah. And depends on the child because it has to be interesting and motivating to them. Uh,
Mhm.
but I think, yeah, Jasper has some great resources. I think that it might be CPRT. Their website online has like a play assessment, I think, for looking specifically at maybe where a child is at to begin with.
In the classroom. That's great. I'll look at there as well. CPRT, social savvy. There is, I know there's something. I
Mhm.
will find it and link it. There's some play assessment, and I'm blanking on the name of it right now. Um,
Social
that
savvy is great.
yes, I like
Yeah.
that one. I really do. I
Yeah.
think it has some really good skills listed in it. Any other resources that you can think of or how you stay up to date on NDBI goodness that comes out? Research, resources, providers. Where do you
Yeah.
find all that goodness?
I mean, I don't think anything out of the ordinary, articles. I like going to conferences you and I were talking about, like that NDBI conference is a great one. I know you're working on that right now, so I'll be there. Um, and then I really just rely on all of the great researchers and people in the field who are doing this work kind of across different approaches. So, like looking at the CPRT website and looking at the Project Impact website, and of course the ESDM book, and just trying to see what new resources people are putting out um, and staying up to date that way, but nothing super creative that I can think of.
I know, I feel like social media, I'll see a post, right? Or I might do a Google alert or look for something. But
Yeah,
most of the things I tend to find for myself, following certain people on social media, certain alerts that come up or a post, and then I will go, it'll prompt me to go look into something different,
yeah,
which is incredible. To be able to have social media, that's really all I use it for, is new alerts, new things that are happening,
yeah.
events. I try to stay away from everything else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any advice that you would have for practitioners who would want to learn more about NDBI, move the needle over towards doing NDBI in their
Yeah,
organization or their practice, or they have a passion for it and their organization might not yet have that on their radar, how they can convince them or bring this topic up and just talk about how incredible they are.
yeah. I feel like I really liked what I think it was Dr. Rogers, correct me if I'm wrong, at the conference, somebody had asked, like, I want to learn about these approaches. There's so many of them. What's your advice? And she had said, like, just pick one. Just pick one and learn what you can and then start small, And I think that that's great advice. Like if
Yeah.
you have started learning about the motivational procedures of PRT and you can see how it's a great fit for this client that you're working with or in this certain setting, I think just keep pushing forward there and be able to show people and talk about it by the results that you get and by how fun the session is and by how much the child is enjoying their time and seeking out continued interaction and of course making progress on all of their goals. Um, but I think the results will speak for themselves if you just kind of start small and find those motivating activities, follow the child's lead, think about naturally occurring activities and routines and how we can embed our learning within those. And you can kind of go from there. There's so many resources out there for really learning how to implement some of these strategies well into fidelity. Um, and I think don't be held back by thinking that you have to be doing it perfect 100% of the time right when you start.
Yeah, that's great advice to follow because I don't know that any of us would be there. That's incredible if you were starting
Yeah,
out, just pick it up and can roll through it.
yeah.
And I'm wondering if there, oh God, I don't know if there is an article. The 2015 Schreibman article would be a maybe a good place to learn about those overarching kind of characteristics about NDBIs and to kind of see the names of some of the researchers to go out and do this compare and contrast. What's different between this and this, right? They should all have these characteristics and things in similarities, but then there are differences between
Yeah.
different models. So I really like your advice of kind of figuring out, pick it and stick it in what works best for you or your clients. And then just as you want to learn more and do something different or have a different client that might need something a little bit different, pull in
Mhm.
a different model. So I hang out in ESDM world. That's my favorite, but I pull from Jasper. I love some Project Impact, PRT. And so it really, they just can enhance one another. But it can be very overwhelming, I think, to try to learn everything about all of them at once. So I
Yeah.
love the advice that you are articulating as well to just pick one and kind of dig into it and see what you can get out of it.
Yeah, there's a great that Kyle Frost article. I think it was 2020, maybe. We can link that too, where they went and looked at what are the shared features of NDBIs. And there's a couple really clear, concise tables in the article that I think are helpful for understanding similarities and then potential differences
Mm.
across.
I love it. I love it. I will definitely put that link in there. I think I know exactly which one you're talking about. That would be good. Any last parting words of wisdom or advice that you would give to anyone listening who might want to get into NDBIs? Why, kind of that again, why it felt right for you that this is why I ended up where I did.
Yeah. I mean, I think working with young children and families, like it just makes sense. It was such a good and natural fit, especially we've already talked about like developmental appropriateness. And I'm really now, as more and more research is coming out, and also we're just getting to hear more from autistic adults, and I'm trying to learn more about like taking a strength-based approach and neurodiversity affirming practices. Um, I feel like there's really good alignment with some of these teachings and strategies that we find in NDBIs. And so that's kind of where I'm headed next, what I'm excited about and thinking about and trying to just continue to push my learning and thinking forward in that way.
I love it. Onward and upward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sienna, this has been incredible. I appreciate your time. I am so excited to link the resources that you've talked about. Thank you for sharing those with everyone who's listening, who can also go forth and lean into and learn more information about some of the incredible stuff that's out there. It's been just a pleasure having you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
You're welcome.